In this episode, we explore TNT's extraordinary broadcast design experiences. From surprises to challenges, we look at how TNT approaches innovation and storytelling to bring sports news into a new era. Let's kick it off with Steve Fiorello at TNT, alongside Andre Durette and Alison Zullo at Jack Morton, as they dive into how the network decides when to update or create a new set for a show.
I'd say there's many factors. I think the three main factors that I think about right off the top of my head is, what makes sense to our DNA. And our DNA is we're not just a sports show, and this is across the board on all of our productions. We want our sets to be more than just a place where we do, a show. Like, we want our sets to become characters, if you will, to the show and be more involved with the show than just showcasing our talent and having a place to have a conversation to break down plays or whatever it is that we're talking about. All of that factors into, when we get to the point where we're trying to freshen up our set or build a new set from scratch.
And I think that kind of point ties nicely into the next question, which is thinking about the viewers and how do you decide what's going to resonate with them? Too many changes can be disruptive, but not enough can be boring. And how do we find that balance? And I think there was a nice exercise in that for the recent redesign of Inside the NBA.
I think sometimes less is more when we're trying to build something out. And I think what we try and lean into is just let the space evolve into something, give the talent and the show something to work with. So it's really been interesting how the NHL set specifically has drawn social attention with our fan base. And I think it has everything to do with the approach that we take, and less is more, not hammering the viewers over the head. And then just what fits with what our DNA is, and that set absolutely does. So it was really, really interesting to see that response from the fan base. Again, I'd never seen it before.
That's huge, Steve, because you know what? And that's because that rarely happens. And we've been doing this together a long time, and you don't ever get that kind of response. So it's really great that the fact that we were able to figure out what that DNA is for TNT and the NHL, and combine that and make this really cool, iconic set.
Just having something that screams hockey the second you see it is, I think, part of the reason why people reacted to it.
We're always talking about, hey, what's going on in the industry, what's going on in the space, what's some of the coolest stuff, and we don't always look at what the competitors are doing, or at least our competitors. We also look at, hey, what's going on at the convention centers? What are they doing, when they're revealing a new car, and what is going on in different areas? Because I always feel like that's the best blend, right? Taking something from, unconventional television and incorporating it into some of the conventional bits and pieces and guidelines that we have in our TV world.
Yeah, and during the planning of this was kind of tail end of 2020, and so a lot of those launches and events went virtual, and so the virtual technology and all of the ideas coming out of that space were really pushing ahead, and we were really inspired by that, how they could take a boring launch event and turn it into something cool. How can we leverage that same technology and use it in a different way? So I feel like not sure that we would have gotten to that point if it weren't for kind of the way that things happened in 2020. So happy accident.
Yeah, I think about when we talk about both these projects, Steve, what do you think were the biggest challenges we faced? Let's talk about the NHL first, besides the projection mapping.
The biggest thing was the timeline, and purely designing something that we felt was going to be innovative and a more modern spin on what consistently been represented. We didn't know that we were going to be in the NHL business till about 6 months or 7 months out. So not only were we trying to build sets for a studio show, but we're also trying to build out production teams and what the remote complement would look like. There's just a whole litany of production elements that ties into when you're building out a new property from the ground up, which we've never been in the NHL business before. So yeah, if I had to pick one thing with the NHL set, is the timeline. And then as it relates to NBA, I'd say the biggest obstacle with the NBA, or challenge, if you will, and this might sound weird, is just do we redo it or do we not redo it? It's do we build a new set or do we not? And that's a testament to you all, because not only do you build, top rate type studios that are, first in class, but you build them in such a way where we don't necessarily feel like we want to disrupt what we currently have, purely because it works so well.
Yeah, I think for NBA, there's a lot of elements in that set that have been there for a long time that sort of make the show what it is. And they're the things that the fans gravitate towards and the things that were important to keep. Like the big board, the interaction between the crow's nest, doing a regulation half court, all of those things are kind of essential to what the show is, and losing them completely would make you have to kind of go back to the drawing board on what that show is to people. And so I think being able to maintain those things in the new design and still design something that looks completely different all around it was a challenge, but also I think a big success in the end. All right, Steve. So now that we've kind of broken a lot of boundaries in these two sets and really pushed things forward, where do you think the future of broadcast sets are going?
I think there's going to be somewhere where there's a meld, at least this is what I see anyways, a meld of all the components that we're already leaning into in different aspects. So you see some AR, you see practical sets, you see LED, and you also see, this volumetric style of doing productions and studio-based types of shows. So I can envision possibly some meld of all of those great new technologies to create the next best environment for studio shows.
And then I know we talked about fans loving the NHL set, but how do you internally measure success? How do you determine that a set design is successful?
We want to advance. We want to be progressive in the space. We want to be, we want to embrace technology and try new things. But in the same hand, when you have those conversations, okay, it's time, and we're all sitting around looking at each other, it's like, why would we want to mess with it? This thing is great, And I think that's one of the ways we measure success. And then the other way is does it evolve? Does it create opportunities for our talent to create moments within the space? And that's what those sets do.
If we've designed a set that works well, and then in many ways, it's a layered thing, Steve. Like, first of all, does it shoot well? That's the most important thing. Like, I always feel like if we are able to create something for you, that you're able to create those dynamic shots, and that's why we always make the desks roll around and create some very interesting things with foreground elements. That's important. But then, like what we were saying before, it's not like the main character. It's the character. It's subtle. It's something that's behind there that everyone sees. It creates the depth of field that we want. Has the ability to be able to change and adapt as needed, because you need that, because it needs to evolve, right? We don't do these sets every year. We do them every 8 years. So they need to stand the test of time. And that's it. They need to be timeless. So if we're able to do all those things, I think we've hit a home run.